Very good. Very good. So, Bill, if you could just make that full screen, I'd appreciate it.
Full screen.
Great. Well, anyway, we can get started. But anyway, obviously, our very special guest today is Chris Tomlinson. Chris, thank you so much for being here. And I think everybody knows who you are pretty much, but I'm still going to give a little bit of background just in case someone just crawled out from under a rock. But he works for Hearst Newspapers and was named 2021 Columnist of the Year by the Texas Managing Editors. He's also with the Associated Press for 20 years in over 80 countries. He writes commentary, and if you all could mute yourself, if you're not going to be asking a question, that's going to come later. He writes commentary about money, politics, and life in Texas, and as we all know, often it relates to our changing climate. And maybe you don't all know this, but he's also a successful author. And Tomlinson Hill was a book that I thoroughly enjoyed. I really, that's a great book. It was back in New York Times bestseller back in 2014. Once again, if you would all please mute yourself, please mute yourselves. And the other one is that he recently co-wrote another New York Times bestseller, Forget the Alamo, The Rise and Fall of American Myth. And that's one I haven't read yet, but I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. So you can sign up for his newsletter at either the Houston Chronicle or the San Antonio Express News. Next slide, Bill. Okay. So today's different from our normal meeting because instead of a presentation, we're going to conduct an extended Q&A on any topic related to his columns. Someone's still not muted. I mean, if you could check your mute and mute yourself, please, that'd be great. Instead of a presentation, we're going to conduct an extended question and answers on any topic related to his columns, which cover the intersection of Texas business, as I said before, politics, climate change, and government policy. So here's the ground rules. Please keep your questions brief to allow more people to participate. And if you're not talking, mute your line, which I've also asked several times already. And to ask a question, you can do it one of two ways. You can raise your Zoom hand, and there's that little box here down at the bottom. If you go to reactions and click on that, you're going to come up with raise hand. Or you can also put your question in the chat, which will be monitored. Okay? So with that, I think what we'll do is we'll close that window, and then we'll just go to the people screen. Bill, if you can close your screen, that'd be great. Okay, super. So Larry's up first.
Yeah, I've read your series on the ERCOT and the Uri storm and how the pipelines in Texas can own the material that they're shipping, whereas the rest of the United States, it's just you just pay to have them transport it for you. And so I was wondering how this impacts Proposition 6, and also, can you talk a little bit about how you developed the background, the stories that you told? I think it was a series of 3 or 4 articles that you wrote on that.
Sure. Yeah, there were 4 stories in the original series, and then I had a 5th follow-up where we did a deep dive into the campaign finance of the politicians who were primarily responsible for regulating the pipeline industry. So for those who didn't get a chance to read the column, Texas is unique in that we allow pipeline companies to own the commodity that they're transporting. So what most states do is to avoid monopolistic behavior, to guarantee a free and transparent market. Pipeline companies are toll roads. They charge by volume of natural gas that moves through the pipe. In Texas, the pipeline companies oftentimes are the only choice for a natural gas well owner to deliver their commodity to market. And so you've got companies like Energy Transfer and Kinder Morgan who will say to that gas operator, that gas well owner, you must sell your gas to me. Otherwise, I'm not going to transport it. And you're going to pay this price, which is obviously always much cheaper than whatever the benchmark is. And these are multi-year contracts. And that allows the pipeline operator to own the gas once it leaves the well and enters their pipe. They own it. And then they go to a natural gas power plant operator who many times only has access to one natural gas pipeline, say owned by Kinder Morgan. And Kinder Morgan can say to that generator, you have to buy your gas from me, and this is the price you have to pay for the next several years. Oh, and by the way, we're going to keep all of this secret and confidential because it's proprietary information. Obviously, this has been a problem for decades, and natural gas well owners and natural gas off-takers have complained and lobbied hard for the legislature to conform to federal law and to what the rest of the states do. But Texas politicians find themselves very beholden, to the tune of $6.3 million in the last two election cycles to these pipeline operators. And that's only the very top politicians. That's, the Railroad Commission, governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general. We didn't go as deep as the individual lawmakers. The other thing that I brought up in the series was that when a winter storm or there's any sort of adverse weather event comes along, the natural gas companies get to declare force majeure or force of God or exceptional circumstances to avoid having to deliver the gas to the power plants at the price that they agreed upon. One of the lawsuits that I wrote about in the series was brought by Circles X, where they took a look at all of the gas flows in the state in the days leading up to Winter Storm Uri, and they demonstrate how these pipeline operators withheld gas, diverted gas. They even sent gas to Mexico and into storage ahead of the storm. And this is pretty routine because they have an opportunity to declare force majeure, jack up the price, and make extra money. The thesis of many of the lawsuits I wrote about, Circles X, Oklahoma Attorney General, Kansas Attorney General, have all brought suits, is that the pipeline operators took it too far this time. They overdid it. They overplayed their hand and created a shortage of gas. And that is what triggered the blackouts during Winter Storm Uri. And we have, the lawsuits have various kinds of proof. But what's most interesting to me is when we had Winter Storm Elliott this past December, which is very similar, had very similar impact. We didn't have a gas shortage. And we didn't have a gas shortage because the pipeline operators did not do all the diversions and all the shut-ins that they did for Uri. Because as I understand it, there was a conference call with the governor, and he said, I can't protect you if you fail again. And that's why, when you compare the two winter storms, the pipeline companies behaved in extremely different ways. Now, all of the attention from the legislature regarding Winter Storm Uri has been on these natural gas generators and renewable energy. The pipeline operators, the Texas Oil and Gas Association, almost immediately jumped on the bandwagon of blaming wind and solar for the blackouts. And of course, NERC and FERC and dozens of academics have come in and shown that it was actually a failure of the natural gas system, not the renewable energy system. But nevertheless, the lawmakers in Austin decided that they were going to pass only legislation that would impact the renewables industry. So far, there has been 0 significant attempts, let alone laws passed, to address this problem with our natural gas system. So they're kind of, our natural gas pipeline operators are, on their honor to not let another blackout happen like it did during Winter Storm Uri. But there have been no and Proposition 6 will have no impact on them whatsoever. It really is aimed at the generators, and the generators are interested in, well, actually, it's not even the generators. It's trying to force the generators to build more natural gas. And that's also at the beckoning of the pipeline operators in the natural gas industry. As the rest of the country begins to phase out fossil fuels, if the Texas legislature can force electricity generators to build new power plants, they are guaranteeing 40 years of offtake to the pipeline operators and the natural gas well owners. And really, that's what Proposition 6 is about, is guaranteeing a market for natural gas for the next 40 years. That was a very long-winded answer, Larry, and I apologize if that was too deep, but I don't think, I'm not going to assume that everyone read those columns.
But it was very good.
Well, thank you, sir.
Larry Howe, second Larry in a row.
Yeah, the two Larrys. Hey, Chris, I really enjoy your articles and the way you kind of dig into things. You touched on this in answering to Kramer's question, but let me just ask it more specifically. What to get the changes necessary to make maybe the gas pipelines operate more like the electric transmission lines in Texas? Is that do we need to change the railroad commissioners, or vote in different legislators, or both, or something else?
It's the legislature. It's going to have to be black letter law forbidding natural gas or any kind of pipeline operator from owning the commodity in their pipeline. That's what other states have. That's what the feds have. There's really, the Railroad Commission does not have the power to make that change. It would have to be in the state law, and it may even need a constitutional amendment depending on how you look at it.
Okay, thanks.
Judith?
So I wanted to talk about Prop 7. My understanding is it provides billions of dollars over 2 years for low interest loans for gas companies to build natural gas plants. And those are plants that will just be on standby.
No, I think the low interest loans are for any kind of gas plant, not necessarily so there was an effort in the legislature put forward by Berkshire Hathaway and Dan Patrick, Lieutenant Governor, to spend $16 billion of taxpayer money to build several gigawatts of gas plants to be on standby 97% of the time. And the argument there was, we're going to protect the competitive market by keeping those gas plants out of the market. That way the market participants can, will still see prices go up, but we'll only turn on these out of market gas plants when we're on the verge of absolute failure. My understanding is Prop 7 is it just makes the loans available to anyone who wants to build a gas plant. And what's interesting to me is that the big generators, you know, like NRG and Vistra, didn't want it. They said, you know, our problem is not cost of capital. You know, our problem is the market price from day to day, because most of the year, like 90% of the time, these gas plants operate at a loss. They only make their money when demand spikes, because we have an energy only market, wholesale market. We only pay for electricity that we consume. We don't pay anyone to be on standby and available in an emergency. Now ERCOT has played some games with that. Ancillary services is a term that used to be used for kind of maintaining, the right frequency and, just little tiny adjustments here or there. But now we have something called ECRS, which is a backup product that companies bid into and say, I will have so many gigawatts available in case of an emergency. And ECRS is only used when ERCOT declares an emergency. We just got a report from the independent market monitor of ERCOT. And, I'm sorry if I'm digging in too deep here, but, we've created a backup system called ECRS, which is basically a capacity market, though they won't call it that because that will get everybody upset. That has driven up the cost of electricity in Texas so far this year by $8 billion. And that's really what the natural gas companies need. They need higher prices for electricity that will generate higher prices for natural gas so that, the system can continue operating. Because frankly, our wholesale system works a little too well. And the electricity is really kind of too cheap. And that's what the natural gas companies want. That's why this discounted loan program is no one's excited about it. Only Lois Kolkhorst, the senator from Brenham, she seems to be the only person who thinks this is going to solve any problems. It's the day-to-day pricing for electricity and gas that matters the most. And so in a lot of ways, I don't think Prop 7 does anything of any significance. It can pass, it cannot pass. Most of these low interest loan systems, corporations don't want any part of because there's so many strings attached and so many layers. It's just cheaper to go on the open market and get financing in other ways.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Joe Garfunkel.
Okay. Hi, Chris. This is Joe. I have an open-ended question for you. Just wanted to get your thoughts on Exxon and the reference in building out the carbon capture hub here in Houston.
Oh, it's, it's an arsonist putting out, selling firefighting services, right? Honestly, I see, where did he go? I saw some people on this call who emailed me hundreds of times. Bill, I think is, I don't see him right now. Oh, there you are. Bill Hurley writes me all the time about, the true nature of a corporation is to make money, and they've made a lot of money selling fossil fuels. They'll never admit it on a investor relations call or a quarterly conference call, but they see the writing on the wall, and they need a way to make money in the future. And so if they made money putting carbon into the atmosphere, they will try to make money taking carbon out of the atmosphere. And to be You know, it makes perfect sense. I mean, the idea that any of these companies are just going to throw up their hands and say, oh, yes, we were evil and wrong and we've destroyed the planet and we're going to voluntarily go away now. That's kind of a ridiculous expectation. They're going to fight to stay in business. The other thing is, you know, it makes sense that Houston should be a hydrogen carbon capture hub for the future. I mean, we've got the engineering skill. These companies have got the reservoir experience. They know how to drill holes in the ground, and they know how to get access to reservoirs where you can stuff things in or take things out. I mean, it's good. You know, what bothers me is not the hypocrisy of wanting to make money solving a problem that you created. It's the trying to have your cake and eat it too. It's like, oh, we're gonna keep selling more oil. We're gonna burn more petroleum in the future. Fossil fuel production isn't gonna peak until the 2040s. And we're going to capture carbon and we're going to make hydrogen. It's the idea that you want me to believe in the science of carbon capture in old reservoirs, but you're not willing to confirm that we can only release so much CO2 in the atmosphere without overheating the planet. It's like, it's the inconsistency that bothers me. If Darren Woods came out tomorrow and said, yeah, we've got to cut down our production of oil and gas by 40% by 2035, let's be generous. And simultaneously we're going to capture carbon. So, we're going to get there. I'd go for it, and in this way, Vicky Holub over at Oxy is a little better, in that at least she wants her oil to be carbon negative, put away more carbon than she produces.
Thank you.
Yeah. Matt?
Yeah, mine's a two-part question. So I'll lead with a question to you about, are you familiar with Austin Energy's REACH program? Reduce emissions affordably for climate health. It's essentially a self-imposed carbon adder.
Yeah, no, yes, I am aware of Austin Energy's efforts.
Okay. Well, so then I actually participated on the Electric Utility Commission when that and was a champion of getting that put in place. And I want to compare it to the ancillary services efforts and efforts that ERCOT has made to increase the price of energy to address the concerns that our gas industry, et cetera, have. And I would point to REACH as actually a purpose-based mechanism to do it that's been quite effective. And it demonstrates that all the benefits of such pricing pretty much flow directly to Texas in every way. So I haven't found a problem. The program has been in place for 3 years, and it's arguably reduced emissions tied to the city by 4 million tons, essentially a year's worth of energy production by the city at a cost that has been so low, nobody's noticed.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what you can do when you have a municipally owned utility, right? And
a functional market, and a very price-sensitive functional market that likes pricing and actually responds to pricing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one thing, the one thing Austin Energy can do that a lot of retail electricity providers can't is really effective household demand response. They can do these kinds of programs that your retail electric provider, who basically is a suitcase company that operates out of a Starbucks and does trading of whose only function in life is to trade electricity futures. It's yeah.
Well, I guess I'm almost making a plea to you is that Austin Energy lives in fear of the state government. So they've been very, in a sense, relatively quiet about this particular program. But it's been in place now for 3 years. And so
Yeah.
it's arguably a case study showing what would happen if you price carbon emissions in our market. And again, all the benefits flow to Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially means that we allow the coal plant to exist, but it's essentially we're making 80% of the revenue, running it 20% of the time, and just acknowledging that. And so it actually means that coal plant is better poised to serve in emergency conditions. So anyway, it's just, it's the biggest, cheapest program that I'm aware of taking place in the state in terms of mitigation, and
Well, I'm sure I'm sure Austin Energy will want to firebomb my house if I draw any attention to it from the state.
Well, that's the balance.
Yeah, it's like but yeah, you're right. I will consider that for a future column, because I'm trying to write more about solutions and not only problems. But I have to tell you, when I look at my numbers, what generates traffic, what generates emails and social media, and every time I write something about someone doing something good, I get about a third of the traffic as I would for wagging my finger and getting angry. It's luckily my boss lets me take those hits in the interest of trying to be a little more balanced.
What car?
Hi, Chris. I've been enjoying your columns for a long time. So my question actually is along the lines of what you just started talking about, the feedback that you get, and I assume you're getting feedback on your columns and maybe also from discussions and presentations that you give. I was wondering, do you sense like there's some particular topics or some particular way of what you say that tends to influence people that are, let's say they're sort of kind of in the middle and influence them towards being more climate friendly? There's a lot of us, probably everybody on this call who is already 100% convinced, we've got to do a lot, but what about the ones that are not? And what kind of messages do you think are moving those people?
This is an excellent question, and it's one I ask myself every day. The beauty of the internet is that I can see minute to minute how many people are reading my columns. So when they go up at 4 a.m., I know there's a little meter on my phone that says readers are going up, readers are going down, and then we have, part of my evaluation at the end of the year is, am I adding readers? Are people subscribing to the paper after they read my columns? That's what we call conversions. This is, the newspaper, a news organization is a business, or at least we are. We care about delivering things to our customers that they're willing to pay for. And if we have if I'm writing columns that no one's reading and no one's reacting to, and it's not part of the public discussion, the public debate, then I lose my job. It's that simple. And that's the way it should be. No one should pay me to write for, a dozen people. So this is very real. I find that snark, being snarky, kind of being obnoxious, a little bit in the very top of the story. Having a good hook, a good lead, a good nut graph. We call it a paragraph, a nut graph that gets people to go, what the fuck? You know, I used to teach writing at University of Texas. And I always told my students, I said, you know, every story needs a what the fuck factor where the reader goes, oh my God, what is this? I need to keep reading. And they can be something that's delightful, like the cronut or some crazy pastry or Beyonce's, you know, fashion choice for her latest visit to the Third Ward, or it could be, you know, what natural gas companies caused the blackouts, you know, but you know, what I find that gets people really going is logic. I mean, making a very, you know, once I've hooked them with some clever turn of phrase or being obnoxious or whatever, then being able to just logically go through and say, hey, you know, you care about this? Well, here's what you should think about. And you just kind of work your way down. Also, frankly, the effects of climate change, honestly, that's probably doing more to help my columns than anything else. The super hot summers, Winter Storm Uri, Hurricane Harvey. You know, when I started this job almost 10 years ago, every time I mentioned climate change, I would get 100 pieces of hate mail to every piece of email saying I did something good. I would get these 4,000 word explanations from retired geophysicists about how climate change was impossible, you know, it could not possibly be caused by human beings, that it was geological. You know, the number of graphs and equations, and it was, yeah. Sure, I'm a liberal arts major, but you know, I did enough economics that, you know, I can do math. Thank you. And I understand statistics. But you know, it's grabbing people's attention in a creative way, and then just kind of, you know, dazzling them with logic is what my wife calls it. You know, just kind of boil it down to just very basic principles. You know, and most of all, you know, giving people room to change their mind. You know, we're talking about climate, but obviously my books are more about race and racism in Texas. And Tomlinson Hill was about my family's legacy as slaveholders. My grandfather was a Klansman. My great grandfather was a Klansman. And so I write about those things. And when I give public talks about racism, you know, it's about giving people space to change their minds and not have anyone wag their, I'm not going to wag my finger at them. I'm just going to kind of just quietly welcome them to the conversation and not call them out for the fact that they've changed. People need room and time to change their minds. That's probably the most critical thing I've learned as a writer.
Chris, thank you so much. That was really very helpful. In this, time and space to change minds is critical. So thank you.
Yeah.
And Larry, I'm just going to skip you because you've had a chance already. I'm going to go straight to Bill, but hopefully you'll get a chance again. Go ahead, Bill.
Thanks, Roger. And thank you, Chris, for all your good work. I'm, like most people on the call, a fan of your work.
You and thank you for your emails. I remember them.
Yeah. You know Citizens Climate's work in our mission to enact carbon pricing legislation. And from what you see, is there anything else that we should be working on as a group or individually?
You know, I think the economist in me says, you know, carbon pricing is really, that's it. That's the solution that works. You know, I'm not a fan of these trading schemes and such. You know, and, you know, and I understand why CEOs like like a flat carbon tax or a flat carbon price, right? They just want something to plug into their spreadsheets to figure out their pricing going forward. So, you know, I think the more important and frankly, the more confrontational approach is just forcing people to talk about climate change. You know, I go and I interviewed Jim Wright last year at the Railroad Commission. And I was like, so climate change, climate change, climate change. You've got to tell me what you think about climate change. And I'm going to make him either admit that it's real and that something's got to be done, or I'm going to make him say something really stupid and embarrassing that's going to make a really bad headline for him. You know, but I think so many people, especially Texas politicians, skate by without having, you know, Republican politicians do not want to talk about it. They do not want to acknowledge it, and they will avoid talking about it for as long as they can. And that's the only way things are going to change, is when they have to do something about it, when they have to acknowledge it, when it becomes so embarrassing to them to not talk about it. That's why we were talking the Kevin Brady story before, right before we got started, about how he goes, oh, you know, you folks, Climate Citizens League, you guys are very effective in doing what you're doing. You know, Kevin Brady's a climate criminal. Okay. I mean, he's not talking about it. He's not doing anything about it. And, you know, that's such a politician's response. And if he were still in office, I would use that kind of quote to embarrass him as much as I can, because that's the only thing that really changes. Politicians are not leaders. We make the mistake of expecting them to lead, but they're not. I've covered politics all over the world, you know, 30 countries. I used to run the Associated Press Bureau in Austin. I was in charge of all of our political coverage for Texas. What I've learned is politicians are fundamentally followers. They follow whatever way the wind blows. And the more you can make the wind blow toward taking climate action and make it punishing for them to not talk about climate and not do something about climate, the more likely they're going to react. You know, Democrats complain but actually politicians on both sides complain about this all the time. You know, Democrats are like, well, Republicans only care about, you know, raising the budget for schools because they're losing in the suburbs. Well, Democrats only care about crime because they're losing in the suburbs, right? These people, they have to be pushed and they have to be convinced that it's in their interest to take action on an issue. But to expect them to lead on their own, that's never going to happen. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from in my approach. But, you know, a carbon price, preferably a carbon tax, flat rate, written into law, adjusted for inflation, or have some sort of mechanism where the price of carbon's tied to the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. Yeah, I wouldn't push for anything less.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to take my position as moderator to ask a question. You mentioned dazzling them with logic. And then I look at the Paxton being acquitted. And I'm wondering, how is that possible to make any logic out of that? And I mean, do you ever see any possibility of something like ranked choice voting in Texas, or some way to get around, you know, corruption and cronyism? I know that could be a long answer, I think, but I'm just wondering if just maybe a thumbs up. Yeah, that's possible, or thumbs down. It's
yeah,
never.
It's possible. And let me give you an example. You know, beginning in the frankly, beginning with Jim Crow in Texas, we used to have straight ticket voting, right? Instead of going all the way through and having to check, you could just check all Republican or all Democrat. And that was the way it was when Democrats were in control. That's the way it was when Republicans were in control. And then Republicans began to see that the races were getting tight, and that and the straight ticket voting might hurt them. So Speaker Joe Strauss and Greg Abbott, they signed a law that did away with straight ticket voting, because they figured out that, you know, it was in their political interest to force people to go all the way down the ballot, checking all the boxes, because they know very well that most people won't. And so the best way to hold on to the legislature, especially after the 2008 election, where Republicans nearly lost the House, that it was to, you know, do away with that. So, you know, can we see ranked choice voting in Texas? Can we see other reforms? Oh, absolutely. But it will only come when the people in power see that it advantages them, not when it advantages the opposition. As far as the Paxton, you know, they're we're making a big deal out of the $3 million that Dan Patrick received before the impeachment trial from people who support Paxton. Couple of interesting things about that money. One is that politicians are allowed to give money to other politicians. So basically, Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilkes gave Dan Patrick a $3 million war chest to take out every Republican senator who doesn't conform to what Patrick wants. And so that was that's really the big threat of that $3 million. Because Patrick doesn't need it to get reelected, but he can use it to punish every Republican who's gone against him. Second, you know, maybe, yeah, it was meant to influence the impeachment, but more importantly, it's intended to influence the school choice vote that's going to come up. The school voucher special session is going to begin October 15th. That's really how that $3 million was intended. You know, so yeah, it's part of a long game that these two fundamentalist Christian nationalists, Tim Dunn, Ferris Wilkes, and their crowd, which Dan Patrick has been a charter member since at least 2015, when he first started fighting for school vouchers and representing the Dunn and Wilkes interest in the Senate. They've been on a long march. You know, they've been doing this for 15 years to get to this point. And they weren't about to give up, and they're not going to give up. And, you know, we have to have our similar long march for climate. You know, political change just takes time and pressure and money and convincing politicians that if they want to keep their job, they have to change their minds.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll hold up a little bit of hope. Mark Warren, you're next.
Hi, Chris. This is Mark Warren. Thanks for calling. This has been wonderful. You said something about 15 minutes ago that really piqued my interest. You said that the gas plants lose money 90% of the year, and they only make money during emergencies. And I wanted to ask, did I hear that right? And if that is right, can you explain how that is even possible?
Sure. You know, typically Texas has the lowest electricity prices in the country. The price of electricity directly is the price of natural gas. Natural gas prices are also driven by the price of oil. It's, the amount of oil that we produce. The more oil we produce, the lower the natural gas price, because we have all this secondary gas that comes up when we pump oil out of the ground. But, because we need so much energy, historically, it's been in the summers, and we have excess capacity. Give you an idea, our peak was around 85 gigawatts this summer, but most of the year we only use maybe 50. Like in October, we call it the shoulder season. In the summer it gets really, is the head, and then spring and fall are like the shoulders, when we don't use we maybe use 2/3 to half of the amount of electricity. And so because of our wholesale market, we don't pay people to be on standby. We don't pay people to have capacity. And so in those shoulder seasons, there's excess generation. There's plenty of wind and solar. And so the price of electricity plummets, and they just can't make money most of the year. It's only when the demand really begins to spike up. So typically, before Winter Storm Uri, we were probably paying, what was it, $10, $12 a megawatt for most of the year. And that's probably what you were paying in your long-term contracts on your retail electricity provider agreements. They need $25, $30 or better to make these natural gas power plants pay for themselves. And that only happens about 10% of the year. So the rest of the time, we chug along in the between $15 and $25 for a megawatt of electricity. And most of that is losing money. Go ask NRG about their nuclear power plant and how expensive that is to operate. And they'll tell you we're price takers. We have to take whatever price is on the market that day, and 90% of the time that price is a money loser for us. And that's why no one's going to build another nuclear power plant, is because NRG's got that sunk cost down at the South Texas project. But if they had to finance a new nuclear power plant of the same type and scale, no one would ever put the money into that. It makes no sense.
Excuse me, Paul, please.
Yeah, Chris, my question, I don't get to read many of your columns, so you might have covered this, but I'm wondering about the LNG plants going up all along the Gulf Coast to essentially ship gas to Europe to replace Russian gas and so on. To what extent do you think those plants are going to, the availability of those plants to gas producers is going to drive up the gas price?
Oh, well, from your lips to to God's ears. I mean, that's exactly what the natural gas producers are hoping for. Is they want some of that $30 gas when it only when in Texas we're paying $2.64 for it. Right now I think it's between around $35 in Europe. It may be higher than that. It got up to 500 in the panic at the beginning of the Ukraine war. So no, absolutely. This has been on the natural gas industry's agenda for years. They originally thought they were going to go to Asia and get what they call the JKM premium. Loads of China, Japan, most of Southeast Asia is very reliant on gas. Japan, not as much now that, they've restarted some of their nuclear plants, but after they shut down, after the Fukushima shut down, Japan was almost solely running on natural gas, and it was a huge market. So, yes, my personal belief is that natural gas is a bridge fuel for much of the developing world and many of the middle income countries. Right. So what I would love to see is us continue to build LNG plants, ship the gas to Indonesia so that they don't build all those coal plants. So they ship it to island countries that are still burning bunker fuel to generate electricity. Now, I know people will jump on me and say, oh, well, there are too many leaks in the natural gas system. It's not an improvement over coal. Well, let's plug the leaks. But the one thing we do know is that there are a lot of places that need to shut down coal plants, shut down bunker fuel. And I don't think Europe is a long-term market for natural gas. From what I've been reading in Germany and France, they are moving, the whole EU is moving as fast as possible to avoid becoming dependent on US natural gas or anybody's natural gas. They're really making the move towards storage and wind and solar and hydrogen, which they can make themselves. But yeah, I'm actually a big fan of LNG exports. But I know that I'm in the minority opinion among a lot of environmentalists.
Thanks, Chris. Coming up with 5 minutes left or so, but next in line is Bill Hurley.
Yeah, hi, Chris. Yeah, I'm a big fan of yours, and appreciate you noticing my email, responding to my email.
Oh yeah, no, I can't respond to all emails, but I appreciate you keeping me in check, calling me out every once in a while.
Well, you're one of my favorites, and I'm really happy that you're in the San Antonio paper. You're in our business section, which I think is very apropos. That's what we need to do in order to know thy enemy. That's is to understand that those guys are not bad guys. Our opponents are not bad guys. In the long run, we'll lose if we keep making. Look at Smith and Wesson had a deal with Clinton when Clinton was president that they were going to put hand locks on his guns in Smith and Wesson. Well, the guy got fired because his shareholders fired him. So, that's you're heroic if you're a business CEO and you do that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's not my comment. I wanted to point out, I did see your afterwards conversation with LeVar Tomlinson on YouTube. And you mentioned that in Texas, we are required to take Texas history, I think in high school. I'm thinking, why don't we require ecology or an environment of our own community? It seems to me a real stupid waste if you graduate from high school and you don't know any more about your environment and your locale than the movie theaters or the water parks or the malls. And that's been my experience, is that people don't understand that kind of stuff, especially with urban sprawl the way it is everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm old enough to remember a time before No Child Left Behind when, I did do little science experiments in the creek near my house in Dallas. And it's seventh grade where you have to take Texas history. And considering how we teach Texas history, the time would be better spent teaching ecology. That's for damn sure. That's a plug for my book, Forget the Alamo.
I read that, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Do we want to squeeze in one more?
Sure.
I think there's Jimmy.
We got the two Larrys and Jimmy. Jimmy, you have a question? Take less than 5 minutes.
Yes. So my question is that with the growth of renewable energy, at least in supplying the electricity market in Texas, one would expect that the clout of renewable energy, the political clout, would have grown, and yet it seems to have gone in the other direction from the time that we were promoting it, or the state was promoting wind, to now when it seems to be repressing it. So what has changed?
Well, it's part of its money, and its relationships. The renewables industry does not write the big checks that the fossil fuel industry does. No one in the electricity industry writes checks like the oil and gas. I mean, the margins on oil and gas are triple of what the margins are on selling electricity. Molecules, 3 times the profit margin than what you get on electrons. And that's why you don't see Exxon getting in the electricity business, right? Because they'll never deliver the return that their shareholders have come to expect. Also, part of it is culture. You go out to West Texas and you go to Midland or Big Spring, and you go to the Rotary Club, and the state rep or the state senator's giving a speech at lunchtime. It's still primarily oil and gas folks in that room, right? And that's the interest that they're going to communicate. So, renewables, people who support renewables, my wife used to work for a company that built wind turbines and solar facilities across the state. She doesn't anymore. They rely on this argument that, oh, we're good for the planet, therefore we shouldn't have to write, $1 million checks to the governor to get what we want. But that's just naive. It's naive. We need, Bill was talking about, I'm on the business page of all the Hearst newspapers in Texas: Laredo, Houston, San Antonio, Beaumont, Midland. We have to align the incentives. That's what everyone tells you in business. Everyone's incentives must be aligned so that we're pushing in the same direction, whether that's a political incentive or a profit incentive or a cultural incentive. We need to find a way to figure out how we can all be successful moving in the same direction. And that's, just sitting back and going, oh, well, we employ, renewables now employs more people than oil and gas. We're a larger part of the budget. We're part of the future. It's naive to think that those statistics alone. It's going to be having a steak dinner on a Wednesday night with at the Petroleum Club in Midland. I mean, that's where you're going to change people's minds. And it's hard work. And it takes a lot of time, and it's the kind of work that you guys do, which is what I find so admirable, because it's a Sisyphean task, rolling that boulder up the mountain every day and having to wake up the next morning and to start again. But it does change things. You are changing people. Kevin Brady knows who you are. He may not be smart enough to, he might not be convinced yet to change his politics, but he's aware, and he wasn't before. And every one of those little steps counts. And so I encourage you to keep fighting and keep working. I know that I will keep writing my columns, and whatever slings and arrows come my way, I'll deal with. But yeah.
Thank you.
Chris, I don't know how to thank you. This has been, we've had several outstanding cocktails and conversations, but I now have a new favorite. Thank you so much. It was your insights into so many different topics related to what we're interested in is just phenomenal. So just a couple of points before we close, but first, next month, October 28th, I've got a speaker. It's going to be Dr. John Nielsen Gammon, Texas State climatologist. So be prepared for that. Another good session. And I think I'd just like to close with, if everybody wants to unmute and applaud, scream, whatever you want to do, to thank Chris for being here today and just for all the insights. And it was just great. I enjoyed myself. And by the way, anybody that put a question in the chat, I know I favored all the hand raising. I apologize, but I'll try to do better next time.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Chris. Thank you.
All right,
Thanks,
keep up
Chris.
the good work. Okay.
Kevin Brady may know who I am, but now it's somebody else in Congress, so who cares?
Dan Crenshaw.
Yeah, or ours, or Morgan Luttrell. Luttrell is the nemesis, but the Texas.
Chris, let me just point out too that when I heard you talking on afterwards about your family's history with racism and stuff, I wanted to mention my grandmother died when she was in her 90s, about 20 years ago, but she died thinking, having dream nightmares that a Black person was under her bed right until she died. So that's to tell you, basically they were teaching you Southerners how evil and, how powerful that stuff is. That is so.
No,
Don't feel bad about your